So throughout this unit, we're teaching you guys about hunger and poverty and its effects in the 21st century and kind of where do we sit today. And today I want to talk to you about coping strategies, but I also want to paint the picture about the linkages between hunger and poverty, because you're going to see this over and over and over again throughout the entirety of this unit. But I'd first like to start out by reminding you of some key issues that we've talked about in the first few units. If you remember, we defined vulnerability to hunger in the United States, and then we also talked about vulnerability in lesser developed countries. In the United States, hunger is defined as through a rubric of food security and food insecurity, whereas in lesser developed countries it tends to be more extreme and defined as the poor or ultra poor. Note that marginalized indigenous populations, disenfranchised, landless, and illiterate and uneducated people groups, no matter where they live, are the most at risk. Also, I want to remind you of the three nested concepts that concluded one of the previous units, that food security versus hunger versus undernutrition are different concepts in and of themselves, but are also intimately linked. When we talk about food insecurity, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's current hunger, but that there's a vulnerability to become hungry. When we talk about hunger, that's the idea that you're receiving less than 2,100 kilocalories in your daily diet. And then when we talk about undernutrition, this is the idea that you're consistently taking in not only the less calories, but also you're missing those micronutrients that we've been talking about throughout this course. Again, I'd like to bring you back to the food security framework. If you remember, one's hunger status is defined by their availability, access, utilization, and vulnerability to food or to food insecurity. So when we talk about availability, is there adequate or inadequate food available? When we talk about access, do they have access to food that they need? When we talk about utilization, are they eating the appropriate foods at the right time and in the right combination? And then vulnerability can have to do with physical or environmental factors, economic and market risks, and as you'll see a bit later in this unit, social and health risks as well. Also to remind you, there's three different types of hunger that tend to come up in our conversations. Chronic hunger is hunger that occurs over a long period of time and for prolonged periods. Acute hunger is when people suffer from hunger for a short period, usually due to a shock or a major weather event or something like that. And then hidden hunger happens when people lack essential micronutrients, even if they have adequate caloric intake. So just to tie it up, I just wanted to introduce you guys to these topics again, because we're going to use them throughout the course of the next few units.